Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Live with Little Data. I'm here today with Tim from the Bottle Club. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Now, we were chatting a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it'd be interesting to have you on the show about Google Analytics. And I think when we talked maybe a year ago at the same event, you'd been struggling with it and were trying Triple Whale. And then you told me you've kind of, unlocked value by using Google Analytics for some other tools. So tell us a little bit about well, perhaps give a little intro to the brand first of all, and tell us a bit about your journey.
Yeah, sure. So we're an alcohol multi-brand retailer. My ethos is to basically make it the ASOS of alcohol. I think we talk a lot at ecom circles and events and roundtables about brands really, and not so much about multi-brands and some of the struggles that come with that. So we've got 7,500 products, 1,000 brands, 500 different categories within beers, wine, spirits, all of the subcategories, whiskey, vodka, etc. So we're trying to tell a lot of stories and work out a lot of things at the same time. And then one of the biggest changes in the last couple of years is moving to GA4, sorry. And we have been racking our heads of trying to understand the data that's available to us. We've gone down the route of looking at segmentation. Do we go into category? Do we go into why people are purchasing and trying to harness the data that's in there has been a real struggle for us.
Yeah.
So what we have realized in the last year is that actually GA4 and GA in general is a incredibly good data gathering tool, but not a very good data visualization tool. So we've spent some time working out a setup where we can see as much data as possible with what it's gathered, but not using GA to do it. And to do that, we've started using Supermetrics. I feel like I've jumped into the
yeah. Well, perhaps before we dive into the stack, let's perhaps just understand the problem a bit more, because as you say, you're dealing with a very large number of SKUs and some quite, I think you sell some quite niche sort of special edition bottles and stuff, which obviously people come to you for. It's great. And so the challenge, you say, is really one of product categorization, trying to make, obviously you can't analyze it on a SKU level. It's trying to make sense of that on some kind of category level or product type level. And I think you were saying you have a number of different ways of sort of splitting up the obviously not just by the type of spirits, but by some other dimensions as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the things for us is that the majority of our acquisition is coming from shopping, so it's very much product orientated, price driven. So understanding the performance of each of those channels has been a real challenge, and GA Universal was very much how we benchmarked against how those channels were performing, where we need to optimize in terms of how are things visualized. And a lot of the things that have made us success in our history has been very much about, okay, let's see the change in performance, let's A/B test against the channel performance based on that knowledge. So if people are price driven, they're coming from shopping, they're coming from Google search ads, what optimizations can we do to the feed? What optimizations can we do for the price competitiveness, etc.? And that's where our biggest wins have been. But then when we had that switch over, we really lost sight of things. We didn't have that same view that everybody was kind of used to.
Yeah, so it's understanding. The classic Google Analytics thing, understanding by campaign and channel, which products are performing well and where the sort of drop off is in yeah. So tell us a bit about the the products you've used to kind of get the data out of Google Analytics into somewhere more useful.
Yeah, so we started using Supermetrics to start with. I had a really big Google spreadsheet last year, which was more of a live P&L. And on January 1st, that completely broke. And I forgot that I'd set everything to kind of year to date. And then 1st of January came, there was no data. And I was like, right, I need to actually streamline this a little bit better. What can I do? Where can I get some more data from? We were already working with Supermetrics to be pulling some certain information that we otherwise couldn't see. And I just dove into it and I started going, well, I can pull this information and I can pull this information. And then I saw how much unrestricted data is in GA4's data warehouse effectively, but it's just not accessible. Like I was always a huge fan of the channel timeline. So in Universal, so that was kind of seeing where the peaks and troughs were. We see 50% of our volume is in the last 10 weeks of the year. So we see that huge spike. We can work out which channels are doing what at what time of year. And then with Universal, we didn't get that. And with GA4, we didn't get that. So the first thing we actually did was in GA4, you can remap a lot of the channels, sources, and mediums into correct categorization. So we sell alcohol, so there's no display, there's no pay video, there's like a lot of things that we restricted on. But because GA4 had broken out all of its different paid channels, it was really blurred in terms of like PMAX performance. Is it cross-channel? Is it paid search? Is it paid shopping? So we brought all of those Google paid channels into a group called Google Paid.
Yep.
And then cleaned up or organic. We were on WebGain's affiliate network and we moved to AWIN. So there was a disparity in terms of which one was affiliate, which one was referral. So going in, checking source and mediums and putting them into their right channels. So we've got a much more clearer view for comparative performance against what Universal would have had. So Google for Google, affiliate for affiliate. So that was the first task, and then
as you say, the default channel grouping is very sort of like granular on Google ads, but not on the rest. So
nothing else. But if you've got a certain setup, and if you've got certain channels that you otherwise other people don't use that isn't going to get in there, it's going to suddenly go into referral. If you're doing loads of PR stuff and it's actually all these kind of, it's not direct traffic, it's something else. So if you go in and really look at your sources and mediums, clean it up, put it where it needs to be, is one, helps a lot. And also can then track conversion rate against those channels. But that data is then accessible outside of GA. So then the next point of the journey was, okay, let's put that into Supermetrics. Let's look at it on a day level by numerical value by channel. And then because I was doing the whole P&L redo from the previous year, I brought that into Databox. And Databox is an unreal tool. If you have the use case for it, it's a really powerful tool for visualization. There's so many different ways of using it. But one of the really interesting things you can do in there is you can bring in multiple metrics and then times divide, add them together to come up with a score. So I calculate conversion rate by channel using two different sources of data into Databox. And that's my truth. And obviously we've had a conversation about how Little Data's revenue attribution makes a big difference for GA because GA was off. So I was using Shopify export by Better Reports as my performance, my store performance data. And then I was using my session data and click data coming from GA and then using them in platform but obviously now that we've got Little Data and we're testing how that's going, we can start using that instead.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we were bringing that data into a really structured Google spreadsheet using Supermetrics, simply by date value and a numerical value. And that's how Databox interprets data. So you can do a timeline view. And then I was also able to bring in historical universal data from the previous year into the same sheet. So I can actually benchmark against the following year from the same.
Yeah, because that's also the classic problem everyone's having is the year-on-year analysis. Obviously, we were pushing people to start GA4 early so that you'd have that. But the reality is most people didn't start until last summer, so they've only really got under a year or maybe just over a year of data. So there's no really. I mean, it's easier, but from this point, but you're right. Being able to do that in a spreadsheet is quite possible.
So then we because we've then remapped all the categories to all the channels to be the same. We were able to pull historic data by day into one export, put that in within the same column by the date, and then you can benchmark. There's a little bit of disparity and it kind of slightly overweights for this year, but you can kind of see an overall benchmark performance against universal data to work out if the same trends are there. But yeah, so you can unlock an incredible amount of things in Supermetrics, bring them in via date, and then put them into Databox to visualize them over a timeline. But even things like we have a lot of activations with suppliers, so we want to benchmark the performance and the clicks and click-through rate and viewership of certain elements on site. So our banners, in-collection ad blocks, navigation ad blocks, all of those have got like an event ID, and we can again use, because of the restrictions in GA, the thresholding, we can't see that data at all in GA dashboard. It just won't let you see it because it thinks it's too small a data set. You can work out who it is and they really don't want that. But Supermetrics doesn't have the same restrictions, so I can actually get genuine event data coming from my event ID and then benchmark against it, bring it into a dashboard for the suppliers to see the click-through rate, performance of all of the blocks, and where's working, where isn't.
Yeah, that's great. And so the end result, in Databox. By the way, it's a great tool. We actually use it internally for our own, putting GA4 into for our own site. How would you say that's then being used? Is that something you can sort of rely on at a sort of management level to say, right, this is our overall performance of the business, or are you still using any other reporting tools alongside that?
We do actually, and I think we've actually unlocked bits of data that we haven't had. We had a conversation about this, that one thing I love about e-commerce and I love about Shopify is that because you're storing sales data against the product ID, if you start enriching that product with further data, you can actually backdate performance. So like we added closure, material, so is it glass, is it aluminium, is it plastic? And you can actually go back historically for all of the sales of that product to see if there's been a change in things. So I always have the line of e-commerce has all of the answers, but we don't necessarily know what the question is. Being asked a question to go, I don't know, but let me go and find out. But we've then, because Shopify doesn't have a great taxonomy or categorization, and we genuinely need that, we built really in-depth PIM that enriches the product, and then we're able to use those tags on the product to export data performance using a tool called Better Reports. That then comes into brilliant Shopify app, one of my favorite Shopify apps, no offense there, that we can then export that into Google Spreadsheet as well, into Databox, and we can see by whiskey, vodka, rum performance against last year. Are we down on whiskey sales? Are we down on champagne sales? And start pinpointing where there's actually some losses. So we're currently down on champagne. There's a whole change in the champagne market at the moment, and we can go in and go, okay, this is where we're losing revenue against target in this category. Okay, which brands in this category are the issue? Okay, Bollinger's down, Moet's up, Beverly goes up. So we get to have a lot more granularity in terms of where there are efficiencies and performance impacts that we can kind of. And also just price competitiveness. Like if we're £10 out on market on Bollinger, we're not going to sell much. So if we can work out which one of the products within there is actually the issue, that we can't do that on 7,500 SKUs, but if we can break it down to what area we're losing on, we can start going to work out what's going on.
Yeah, and going back to your really good point about not always having the right questions, I think that's where it's so important to actually just start collecting all this accurate data, even if you're not necessarily analyzing it now. One of the big themes of this live stream has been pushing to people to sort of like, let's capture in Google Analytics, let's capture the actual events of what people do with all the products. Yes, you can have in Google Analytics. I also highly recommend sort of streaming it into BigQuery as a sort of ultimate sort of, let's say, data safe. And then, I truly believe that's the area where we're going to see big advances in AI the next couple of years, is being able to sort of plug in structured data sources, and it learns that, because Google Analytics is like a standard sort of format it can read, and then knowing that, okay, because that's where it's kind of cool. Not only can you ask natural language questions like, which is my best performing channel for whiskey, but you can also say, basically go away and figure out where are what are the dimensions that predict different conversion rate, and it may well come back and say, hey, actually, what's really interesting is screw tops, always convert 3% better, or whatever it is. So I think that's where it's so important that brands focus on just actually the accurate data capture, just get that in, get that tracked, and then at a late, I don't think the AI is quite there yet, but it's a dead cert that it'll get there within a couple of years.
Well, somebody asked me a talk the other day about where I think AI is, and I think the current problem with AI is actually understanding the categorization. So like we use Algolia for search and merch, and it's AI, but it doesn't have any context to our products. So it starts associating things that it thinks it understands. So we had an issue for a couple of weeks where Algolia had thought that vodka and the word Smirnoff were the same thing. So anyone that searched for Smirnoff searched for vodka and didn't see any Smirnoff. It's because logically that they are the same thing, but that's the lack of context. That's why difference between machine learning and us, right? So I think the more that you can give, as you said, the more data you can collect, and the more structure and context you can give a query, the more you're going to get out of it. And I think that's the set we're going to have to start working with AI, is asking the correct question with context, not just broad.
Yes, the understanding basically that someone searching for vodka almost certainly wants to see Smirnoff, but someone searching for Smirnoff only wants to see Smirnoff.
Exactly.
It's certainly different. Yeah. Okay, so let's. So you've also been trying out Little Data's app the last few days. Tell us about your sort of first impressions there. And
yeah, it's really interesting. I think as our conversation before we did this live stream, that we didn't trust GA's attribution and GA's conversion. So sessions we completely agreed on, they genuinely matched up, but the problem was always, do we think that the revenue is right? Why does that number not match? How can we say this is conversion rate? This wasn't how many conversions we did have, so my conversion rate's way off, or that there may be a bot crawling the site which is over indexed on. So what do we do to fix? How do we know what the truth is?
Yeah.
So obviously with Little Data, we're getting a lot more accurate comparative data to our revenue and to our conversion. So I mean, it's early doors, but it is very clear that it's tracking a lot more in line with the sales. But I mean, we've been using Triple Whale for about 1.5 years, and whenever people ask me why, I said, you need to pick a source of truth. I think everybody's looking here for GA and looking at Shopify for this, and trying to, and then you get distracted by, Klaviyo's attribution, which is always overinflated, and GA sometimes under attributes, and Facebook over attributes, and you just start being a bit lost. And you'll have stakeholders of business as well. I've been into the Facebook app, and you've only got 2 rows, and somebody else, well, actually it's 5. So that discrepancy is where we've always had an issue. So we've used Triple Whale and just said that is a hard and fast rule. This is what our source of data is for now, until we have a better solution. This is what we're prepared to use as our base.
So I think you're absolutely right. There's 2 different types of accuracy that we talk about. So there's basically the actual revenue accuracy, the actual top line revenue matches. And I guess for most brands on Shopify is the source of truth for that. So you're going to trust a platform where basically, because the revenue in Shopify is basically what's hitting your bank account. So what we're trying to do at Little Data is make sure the revenue in the platforms, including in Google Analytics, is as close to that as possible. And that includes tracking all the nuances of returns, cancellations, upsells. All of these things can obviously, a source of variance. But then there's a second kind of accuracy, which is attribution accuracy. So just how that revenue splits out across the channels of campaigns. And I would say Triple Whale's been very focused at tackling that second one, attribution accuracy, and making sure that basically, they all add up to 100%. And now we can also do that in Google Analytics, but I would say we're more focused on the first type, which is actually, let's start with just making sure the top line number actually just total revenue just agrees, and then everything you break down from that, hopefully you have more trust in.
I think especially when you're working with things like conversion rate, and that's one of your benchmarks performance, if you don't have an accurate source of truth for the number of sessions and number of conversions, and if you start tracking, like we've got a massive, every second Friday we have like every single one of our product pages is crawled by a bot. So then you see conversion rates like dips down because it's saying that you've had these many sessions, but you haven't. So, and everyone's like, oh, what's happened this week? This has happened. And I'm like, no, it's not genuine. So understanding that data and having a source of truth, conversion, this is where it's come from. This is how we're doing. And then if you, for example, looking at your organic search versus paid search conversion rate, and you realize that what people are searching for and the keywords that you're ranking for, you are not matching that questionnaire accurately. So why can we add more stuff to those to improve the conversion rate from that channel, because it's a different requirement from the customer versus someone that's coming for a particular product or a particular collection and know what they want. There's a completely different intent based on the channel.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a super interesting topic as well about the sort of bots and what is actually a true sort of user session. We had a really interesting tech partner on the show a few weeks back, Yofi, that basically specializes in trying to distinguish bots from from real visitors, and they have some cool basically sort of mouse tracking technology that actually decides based on how formulaic your kind of movements across the page whether you're likely to be a real person. But his point was it's tricky because if you really excluded everyone on your site who was a bot, you'd probably the sessions would probably drop to a level which you didn't really recognize. So, but as you say, on the other hand, if you have like that regular occurrence, when there's a point in the week where the bot always comes around, then that's kind of tricky as well because it could always remember to exclude that.
Yeah,
exactly. On a weekly basis, it makes sense, but on a daily basis, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Have you? I mean.
Yeah. Sorry. The other thing I was going to say is fraud as well. So we get an elevated amount of fraud. So again, that is a big impact. So you're getting like your trade meeting with your performance team and be like, "Oh, your ROAS has been incredible this week. We smashed it." Like, yeah, it was a £10,000 fraudulent transaction. It's going to get refunded.
Yeah.
If you start excluding that, it's not as good as you think it is. So again, without the understanding of the data, understanding of the sessions, when you're benchmarking specifically for conversion rate, you've really got to look at, know your numbers, know what good performance or bad performance is.
But that, I guess that's the important point about because presumably when you have that fraudulent transaction through, you then cancel it after the purchase. So that's again a reason to feed that back into Google Analytics in the channel so that it feeds back into So, for example, that then nets out the return on ad spend because you say otherwise it looks crazy good.
Yeah, the other one for refunds that getting a handle on is restock versus non-restock. If you have like things like breakages, because we get a lot of breakages with refunds. Your cost of goods number for your actual kind of profit, the P&L. Your cost of goods doesn't go back down again, but your revenue does. So that one day you'll be like, I've made no money because of this, because of these refunds, because you've refunded money out, but you haven't restocked any goods. So you've just lost stock effectively. And I think over the last year, we've got very good at understanding our numbers. Like we're very much profitability focused rather than revenue focused. So we've stripped back some of our targets, some of our revenue goals to focus on that. And all of it comes from a true source of information and this global big spreadsheet that we have of all of our metrics that we've got that for shipping, we've got that for acquisition, we've got that for Instagram performance and click-through rates and things. So very data focused.
So it's a good point. We actually skipped over, which is important, as you say, because what you are trying to get into Databox is profit. And so, as you say, you're also pulling in cost of goods sold and shipping costs into that spreadsheet, right?
Yes, I'm very proud of the shipping one. So I've got like the team in the warehouse do a register every morning that goes against their salaries, so we know how much we paid for the staff that are in the warehouse. We know how much they've used for boxes, how much has been used on couriers based on the different, if they've used DPD or Royal Mail, which services they've used, versus the incoming shipping revenue. So I mean, we do lose on our shipping because it's so expensive to ship heavy breakable goods next day. So it's an allowance that we make, but we obviously want to minimize that and get kind of into like a micro efficiencies space where we can go, okay, if we fix this, we change this packaging, we can start saving here and here. And that is literally on a day level. So when I first did it, I was like, oh my God, we made profit on shipping on a Sunday. I was like, oh, wait, they weren't working.
So,
all the staff costs.
Warehouse.
But so by day, we can see that, how efficient are we doing? How much team do we need to get the orders out? And it's kind of finding those balances. And I did a talk on profitability, not last week, the week before, and it's all about those. When you're working with such small margins like we are, it's looking for those micro efficiencies in as many areas as possible. If you can find a little win here and a little win there, you really are. 1% when you're only making 20 is a considerable amount of impact. So
no, I get that, and as you say, that does kind of have to be done in a spreadsheet because those shipping and staff costs, they're never going to be sort of in Shopify, and again, typically, it's hard to import this into Google Analytics. So having a spreadsheet where you calculate that and then effectively pull that back into the reporting tool with gross profit is that's pretty important.
We're in a place where we've got unique rates with all our carriers as well, so that's kind of not supported by a lot of the shipping platforms because your rate's going to be different. So we know that our rates now at this price, we'll put that in from this date onwards, and then times number per day for that unit will be this much courier cost. So
And as you rightly say, like you're in a category where margins are tight, right? Alcohol is not a high margin business, so you've got to be really sharp on the stuff to keep ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're 20 to 25% average margin, and we're a hard and fast rule for 10% cost of acquisition. So we've got to run that business within like 10%. So you've got your transaction fees, which we've changed payment gateway to grab a little bit more revenue there, and we've got to run the whole team, all of the tech and text with the number of SKUs that we have and the functionality that we have. We've got really high tech costs, so making sure that each one of those is as efficient as possible. Because it's got to fit within that 10%.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about all we have time for. But thank you very much for explaining how you're doing the data with Google Analytics. It sounds like a really good approach to, as you say, using the best of GA, which is the accurate data capture, sessions, campaign and channel tracking, and then you say augmenting that with the product and revenue and profit data, which is the other bits that are not in there.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for coming on the show, and good luck.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.